the ninth gate of the cosmos. Prologue. Deep in the void, where even light dares not trespass, something awakens. A wormhole, vast, swirling, alive, rips through the fabric of space itself. Scientists call it an anomaly. The legends? They call it the ninth gate, a passage to the homeworld of the first ones. The mythic architects of the universe, the creators of both factions locked in an eternal war. Whoever reaches it first will claim the knowledge of the gods. And with the power to remold reality. Now fleets race through the stars, betrayal festers in the shadows, and at the heart of it all, one question burns: what lies beyond the gate? Chapter 1. The Signal. The void stretched infinitely, a tapestry of black speckled with cold, distant stars. Aboard the Sovereign's Wrath, Captain Dane Valcor stared into the abyss through the reinforced viewport, fingers curling around the edges of the command console. The wormhole, a swirling, luminous vortex, loomed in the distance, its edges crackling with energy that defied physics. It had appeared 2 days ago, unannounced, unpredicted, and now every major faction in the galaxy had set their sights on it. "Status report," Dane commanded, his voice sharp as a plasma blade. Lieutenant Alara Voss, his second-in-command, turned from her holodisplay. "Long-range scans confirm multiple incoming vessels. The Dominion Armada is 3 hours out. The Concordance fleet follows close behind. Both are armed for war." Dane exhaled slowly. "We knew this would happen. Everyone wants to be first through that gate. Any word from our scouts?" Alara nodded. The Raven's cry sent preliminary readings before it went dark. No wreckage, no distress beacon, just silence. They were the first to get close, and now they're gone. Dane's jaw tightened. "That's not a malfunction, that's a warning." Before Alara could respond, the ship's comms crackled to life, filled with bursts of static. Then, a voice, fragmented, hollow. "The gate, it's not, it's awake. Run." The bridge fell silent. Crew members exchanged uneasy glances. "Source?" Dane asked. "Unknown," Alara said, fingers dancing across her console. "But it's coming." From inside the wormhole, Dane turned back to the viewport, watching the cosmic maelstrom churn. "Wake the battle group," he said. "We go in." The race begins across the galaxy. Alarms blared in warships of every allegiance. The Dominion's flagships surged forward, their crimson hulls gleaming under distant starlight. The Concordance's dreadnoughts adjusted course, sleek and ominous. Even the rogue factions, pirates and scavengers, whispered among the void, drawn by the legend of the first ones. At the heart of it all, the wormhole pulsed. It wasn't just a gateway, it was waiting. As the Sovereign's Wrath moved into position, Dane Valcor took one last look at the stars he had known his whole life. Beyond the ninth gate lay the truth, or oblivion, and he would be the first to find out, the descent into darkness. The Sovereign's Wrath drifted closer, its hull shuddering as it breached the wormhole's outer gravitational pull. Shields groaned under the strain, flickering with bursts of static. The crew held their breath as the vast anomaly expanded before them, an endless tunnel of shifting light and shadow. "Hold course steady," Dane barked, gripping the command console. Tighter. Alira's fingers danced across the controls. "Stabilizers at full power. Hull integrity at 89%. No, dropping. This thing is pulling us in faster than we expected." The viewport filled with a brilliant, undulating glow, spiraling in fractal patterns. It wasn't just a void. It was something alive. A junior officer at the sensor station paled. "Captain, I'm detecting something inside the gate." Dane narrowed his eyes. "Clarify." The officer swallowed hard, double-checking his readings. "Multiple structures, they're massive. I'm seeing metallic formations, possibly stations, ruins, but sir, they're moving." Alara turned sharply. "Moving, as in operational?" "Negative. They're shifting, like they're caught in a temporal drift. Some vanish and reappear seconds later. Others seem complete, like they were never finished." It's unlike anything we've ever seen. Dane's gaze flickered to the swirling mass ahead. If what the sensors were picking up was real, then this was no ordinary wormhole. This was a trap. Or a test. We push forward, he decided. Prepare for maneuvering thrusters and weapons primed. If anything moves toward us, we don't wait for introductions. Alara nodded. Understood. The ship lurched as unseen forces pulled it deeper. The walls of the wormhole twisted and bent like liquid light, and deep within the shifting void, something watched. For the first time in his career, Captain Dane Valcor felt the gnawing whisper of doubt. What if the first ones didn't leave? What if they were waiting? Chapter 2. Into the Abyss. The Sovereign's wrath shuddered violently as it crossed the event horizon. The bridge lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the faces of the crew. Beyond the viewport, the wormhole's interior was unlike anything Dane Valcor had ever seen. No swirling tunnel of light, no gravitational whirlpool. Instead, it was vast, empty, a void without stars. Status! Dane barked. Alara Voss worked her console with precision. We're inside, but, Captain, this isn't normal. Scanners are struggling to map anything. It's like we've entered a space between spaces. Confirming, another officer added. Sensors are picking up echoes, distortions, but no celestial bodies, no fixed points. We might as well be floating in a blind eternity. Dane tightened his grip on the console. Can we navigate? Alara hesitated. Maybe. But there's something else. That signal we picked up, it's stronger now, closer, almost like it's calling us forward. A burst of static filled the comms. Then that voice, hollow, fragmented. They are not gone. They are waiting. Do not wake them. The crew tensed. Alara's eyes darted toward Dane, her expression unreadable. Orders, Captain? Dane inhaled sharply. They had come too far to turn back. Whatever lay ahead, they had to face it. We move forward, slow and steady, and we prepare for anything. Thug. Ruins of the first ones as the Sovereign's wrath advanced into the abyss. The darkness around them began to shift. Shapes materialized from the void, vast, titanic ruins, hovering like shattered monuments of a forgotten era. Towering obelisks of black metal stretched endlessly in every direction, some half-formed, others fractured as if broken by time itself. Their surfaces glowed with intricate shifting patterns, glyphs older than recorded history. Alara adjusted. The ship's scanners, her fingers moving quickly over the controls. These structures are enormous, kilometers wide at least. Some appear to be entire cities, but they're unfinished. The material composition is unknown. It doesn't match anything in our databases. Dane leaned closer to the viewport, his pulse steady but his instincts on edge. This isn't just a wormhole, he murmured. It's a graveyard. The signal intensified. The ruins pulsed in response. Then, movement. A shadow drifted between the ruins. Not a ship. Not a machine. Something alive. And it had noticed them. A presence in the dark. Captain, we have motion. The sensor officer's voice wavered as data streamed across his display. Something massive. Uncertain life signs. No known profile. It's shifting. Dane's eyes narrowed. Weapons at the ready. I want all decks on high alert. If it moves toward us, we respond. The crew worked quickly, activating the ship's shields and priming its forward cannons. The energy hum of the Sovereign's wrath grew as defensive systems came online, but no one on board felt safer. Alara's voice was hushed, but firm. It's watching us, Captain. The viewport darkened as the presence neared. A vast, undulating mass of black and silver, its form constantly shifting, rewriting itself in ways that defied logic. It moved with purpose, gliding soundlessly through the void, its edges trailing mist-like tendrils of energy. Then, with a sudden flicker, it vanished. Where did it go? Dane demanded. The bridge crew scrambled for answers. Unknown. It's not on sensors anymore. A new signal erupted through the comms. This time, not static, a voice, clear, cold, ancient. You were warned. Every light on the ship flickered out. The crew gasped as darkness swallowed the bridge. Screens flashed error. Codesway's consoles blinked offline. The steady hum of the engines vanished into silence. Then, one by one, the emergency lights flickered back on, and something new appeared on the main screen. A planet. No records, no prior readings, an impossible world floating in the nothingness. Danes. Breath caught. Helm set course, we're going in. And deep within the shifting void, something smiled. Chapter 3. The Lost World. The Sovereign's wrath drifted in eerie silence, the planet looming ahead like a specter in the void. It was impossible. No celestial body should exist here, in this vast emptiness beyond the ninth gate. And yet, there. It was a world of shadow and light, its atmosphere swirling with unidentifiable storms. Deep within its surface, structures gleamed like dying embers, remnants of an ancient civilization. Dane Valcor stood rigid, his pulse steady but his mind racing. "Alara, what are we seeing?" Alara Voss's fingers danced over the sensor array, frustration flickering in her expression. "Scanners are struggling to penetrate the atmosphere. There's interference. Something is disrupting our readings. But what I can tell you is that planet is alive." Dane frowned. "Clarify." Alara adjusted the holo display, bringing up distortions in the energy signatures. "There's an oscillation in the electromagnetic field, almost like a heartbeat. The whole planet is pulsing." The bridge fell into an uneasy silence. The idea that the planet itself could be a living entity wasn't impossible, but it was unsettling. "Captain," the comms officer called out, "we're receiving another transmission, same source as before, patching it through now." The bridge's speakers crackled. Then, a voice deep and resonant, ancient beyond comprehension. "You have entered the resting place of the first ones. Turn back, or be undone." A chill passed through the crew. Some exchanged uneasy glances. Others stood frozen, as if the very air had thickened with unseen weight. Dane exhaled slowly. "Who are you? Are you one of them?" Silence. Then, "They sleep. And if they wake, the void will tremble." The transmission cut. The screens flickered. The planet pulsed again, stronger this time. Dane set his jaw. "We came here for answers. We're going down. Helm, prepare for atmospheric entry. Tactical. Keep. Weapons primed. I don't want any surprises." Alara hesitated but nodded. "Understood," dropping us into descent pattern. The descent into shadow. The Sovereign's wrath surged forward, its hull trembling as it breached the planet's upper atmosphere. The storms roared in welcome, arcs of lightning dancing across the void, their color unnatural, deep violet, edged, with black fire. The winds howled, rattling the ship as it pushed through the turbulent skies. "Gravity is unstable," Alara reported, gripping the console. "It's fluctuating. One moment it's normal, the next it's 3 times what it should be. We're compensating, but if it shifts too violently, we might be torn apart." Dane nodded grimly. "We hold course. Tactical. Anything moving down there?" The sensor officer's brow furrowed. "Captain, this doesn't make sense. I'm seeing ruins, miles and miles of structures, but they aren't static." "Explain." "They're shifting, not crumbling, not collapsing, moving, as if the planet itself is rearranging them. And something else." Dane leaned forward. "What else?" The officer's voice lowered, barely above a whisper. "I'm detecting life signs, thousands, but they're not consistent. Some flicker in and out. Others are registering as partial biological signatures. Half there, half missing. It's as if the very fabric of reality is unstable here." Dane exchanged a glance with Alara, who was already running calculations. "Captain, I think this world exists in multiple states at once. Not fully in our reality, not fully outside it. We could be looking at echoes of the past. Or something much worse." The ship shuddered violently. A warning klaxon blared. Massive energy surge. "Detected," the comms officer shouted. It's coming from the surface. Outside the viewport, the storm clouds parted for a brief moment, revealing something immense beneath them. A structure unlike any other. A temple? A fortress? It stretched for miles, its architecture alien, adorned with glyphs that pulsed in sequence with the planet's rhythmic heartbeat. But the moment the ship's sensors locked onto it, the ruins shifted again, vanishing into the mist. Alara swore under her breath. Did we just lose an entire city? Dane's gut tightened. No, it's still there. We're just seeing what it wants us to see. Helm, take us lower. If there are answers, they're in that structure. The Watchers, as the Sovereign's wrath descended. The clouds grew heavier, thickening like a living thing. The further they pushed, the darker the world became. And then, movement. Contact, the sensor officer yelled. Unknown entities on approach, fast. The viewport illuminated with proximity warnings. Shapes moved within the storm, humanoid but wrong. Tall, elongated figures with shifting forms, as if they were struggling to maintain a singular existence. Their eyes glowed with a cold, pale fire, and there were dozens of them. Alara's hands flew across her controls. Captain, they're locking onto us. Dane stood firm. Shields to maximum. Hold fire until they make a move. We're not starting a war yet. The figures circled the ship, spectral outlines against the darkness. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the comms crackled again. You are unworthy. Without warning, the figures lunged. The ship rocked as energy surged through the hull. Consoles sparked, the lights dimmed. Direct impact, Alara shouted. Shields are failing. Weapons free, Dine roared. Target anything that moves. The Sovereign's wrath retaliated. Cannons fired, slicing through the storm. The figures shrieked, their forms twisting and unraveling under the force of the blasts. But for everyone that fell, more emerged. The storm intensified. The planet pulsed. The ruins below gleamed with a terrible light. And then, a tear ripped through reality itself. From the depths of the planet, something awoke, something old, something hungry, and the ninth gate began to open wider. Chapter 4. Awakening the Void. The Sovereign's wrath trembled violently, alarms shrieking as the very fabric of reality twisted around it. The ninth gate had been breached, not just opened, but torn apart, and something was coming through. The Watchers screamed as the dimensional rift widened, their forms dissolving into tendrils of black vapor, as if they had been mere echoes of something greater. Dane Valcor gripped the railing of the command deck, his knuckles white. Helm, break orbit now! We can't, Alara Voss shouted over the blaring alarms. Something's got us. Gravity fluctuations are off the charts. It's like the planet itself is pulling us in. Through the viewport, the planet's surface shifted. The ruins no longer looked like shattered remnants of a long-dead civilization. They moved, reconfiguring into vast symmetrical patterns glowing with a deep violet light. Entire cities, once in ruins, were reforming before their eyes. Those aren't ruins, Alara whispered. They were never ruins. They were just asleep. Deafening boom rattled the ship as an enormous obelisk erupted from the surface, piercing through the clouds like a spear aimed at the heavens. Energy pulsed through its towering structure, spreading across the planet like wildfire. More spires followed, rising in unison, forming a network of conduits older than time itself. And then, a shadow moved within the storm, not the Watchers, something bigger. The Titan stirs. Captain, we have a colossal mass emerging from the planet. The sensor officer cried, sweat beading on his forehead. It's miles wide, it's moving. Dane turned to the viewport, his breath caught in his throat. The surface of the planet cracked as something unfathomably large began to rise. From beneath the ruins, the land split apart, sending shockwaves through the atmosphere as a titanic entity, larger than any construct ever recorded, rose from its eternal slumber. A body of obsidian and shifting metal, adorned with incomprehensible glyphs. A head, crowned with towering spires, its eyes burning with the same violet light that pulsed through the ruins. And when it turned, it looked directly at them. I see you. The voice was not sound. It was inside their minds, crushing and infinite. The weight of its presence alone sent crew members to their knees, clutching their heads in agony. Alara gasped. This isn't just a being, Captain. This is one of the first ones. Dane forced himself to stand, fighting against the pressure in his skull. He met its burning gaze through the viewport. What are you? We are what came before. We are what will remain. The colossal entity raised an arm, its movements deliberate, as if testing its own existence after untold eons of slumber. Then, with a pulse of energy that shattered the very sky, it reached toward the Sovereign's wrath. Evasive maneuvers, Dane bellowed. All power to the engines. The ship's thrusters roared, struggling against the immense gravitational pull, as the behemoth extended a single, clawed hand. The moment its fingers brushed the Sovereign's wrath, the ship's systems failed. The lights flickered. The hum of the engines died. Alara gasped as her console went dark. Captain, it's overriding our systems. We're not in control anymore. The bridge fell into utter silence, and then everything went black. The darkness speaks. For a moment there was nothing. No ship, no planet. No crew, only the void. Then, whispers. Faint. Endless. They murmured in a language that had no words, resonating deep within the mind. Dane felt himself floating, or perhaps not floating at all. He was somewhere else, outside time, outside existence. He could sense others, fragments of consciousness drifting in the abyss. The crew or something else. A single voice rose above the rest. You do not belong here. Dane turned, though he had no body to turn with, and saw it. A figure stood within. The void, impossibly vast and yet intimately near. It had no true form, shifting between shapes, flickering between what was and what could be. Its presence pressed against the edges of his mind, unraveling everything he understood about reality. Dane tried to speak, but the words disintegrated before they could form. The being moved, and suddenly the whispers became a roar. Leave, before it is too late. Pain shot through him. A force ripped him backward, through the void, through layers of time and space, until, return to the waking world, Dane gasped as he was thrown back into his body. The bridge of the Sovereign's wrath reappeared around him, his crew groaning as they, too, were jolted back into consciousness. Report, he coughed, gripping the console as the ship trembled. Alara groaned, blinking rapidly. We're back. Systems are partially online. I don't know what just happened, but that thing, it let us go. The viewport flickered back to life. Outside, the Titan was withdrawing its hand, its eyes still locked on them. And then in a slow, measured motion it turned away. The obelisks that had risen across the planet began to dim, their energy fading. The storm clouds thickened once more, swallowing the world below. Whatever had awoken was going back to sleep. A message appeared on the comms, silent, yet unmistakable. You are not ready. Dane exhaled. Helm, get us the hell out of here. The Sovereign's wrath roared to life, its engines burning as it pulled away from the cursed world. As they ascended through the dying storm, the planet faded into shadow once more. But as they crossed the threshold of the 9th gate, Dane knew one thing for certain. Something had seen them, and it would be watching. Chapter 5. Shadows of the First Ones. The Sovereign's wrath surged through the void, leaving the 9th gate and the slumbering planet behind. The crew remained silent, each lost in their own haunted thoughts. They had seen something that was never meant to be seen. Dane Valcor sat in the captain's chair, gripping the armrests like they were the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. The whisper of the First One still echoed in his mind. You are not ready. What did it mean? Not ready for what? He exhaled sharply, pushing aside the gnawing questions. Damage report, he ordered. Alara Voss shook herself out of her trance and scanned the readouts. Structural integrity holding, but our power core is unstable. Whatever that thing did to us, it's still lingering in our systems. We need a full Diagnostic. Dane nodded. Get it done. What about the crew? Tactical Officer Relic, a battle-hardened veteran, turned from his station. Physically, minor injuries. Psychologically, we've got some crew members shaken. A few are unresponsive, just staring into space like they saw something beyond. Dane's jaw clenched. He knew that look. He had seen it before, in soldiers who had stared too long into the abyss of war. Keep them under observation, he said, and find out if that thing left anything behind on this ship. I don't want surprises. Alara hesitated. Captain, there's something else. She tapped a command into her console, and the central holo display flickered to life. It was a star map. But not just any star map, a new one. This wasn't here before, Alara said, her voice hushed. Our navigation systems recorded it the moment we left the planet. It's a set of coordinates. Dane's pulse quickened. Coordinates to what? Alara's fingers flew over the controls. The map zoomed in, focusing on a location deep in uncharted space. A place no known ship had ever reached. I don't know, she admitted. But I think it's a message, or a challenge. Dane stared at the glowing marker on the display. He had a choice to make. They could leave this behind, pretend none of this had ever happened, or they could follow the path the first ones had left for them, and risk finding something far worse. Chapter 6. Into the Unknown. The hum of the engines had settled into a steady rhythm, but the quiet in the bridge of the Sovereign's wrath was anything but peaceful. The crew was on edge, each one of them acutely aware of the choice they had made. They were on their way to the unknown, to the coordinates that had mysteriously appeared in their systems after their encounter with the first one. A destination, a message, a warning. Whatever it was, it had made them feel like they were being drawn in, like cosmic strings were pulling them towards something they could neither comprehend nor resist. Dine Valcor paced the length of the command deck, unable to sit still. His mind was consumed with 1,000 thoughts, each one more troubling than the last. What would they find at the end of these coordinates? His gut twisted with the weight of their decision, but deep down, a part of him knew that this was what they were meant to do. They had come this far. Turning back now wasn't an option, but what if it wasn't a test? What if the first ones weren't offering a choice at all, just a path to destruction? He stopped in front of the viewport, staring into the vastness of space. The stars outside were distant, cold pinpricks in the velvet blackness. And yet, something about the emptiness made his pulse quicken. They were heading straight into the heart of nowhere. Captain, Alara Voss said softly, breaking his thoughts. She was at her console, a frown etched across her face. We're approaching the coordinates, but there's something strange about this place. It's off. Dane turned to her, raising an eyebrow. Explain. Alara's fingers danced over her controls, her eyes flicking back and forth between different data streams. I've never seen a void like this. The space around us, it's as though the very fabric of reality is warped. Look here. She gestured to the screen where a large mass of empty space hovered like a dark stain against the star field. There's a distortion, not just gravity anomalies. This is something else. Dane moved to her side and peered at the display. It looks like the space itself is bending. Alara nodded. That's exactly it. This could be the edge of something, a boundary or a threshold. I can't make heads or tails of it, but we need to proceed carefully. He took a deep breath. Full stop. Bring us in slow. I want to avoid anything that could catch us off guard. Alara looked up at him, her face pale. Aye, Captain. As the Sovereign's wrath decelerated, the unnatural distortion in space seemed to grow. The ship trembled slightly as it passed through the warped region, and a low hum filled the air, a strange resonance that seemed to vibrate through the very bones of the vessel. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, feeling the pressure of the unknown building. This is it, Dane said quietly. Prepare for anything. The ship continued to creep forward, and soon the distortion began to dissipate. But what lay ahead was even more astonishing than they had expected. The space around them suddenly cleared, revealing a vast, impossibly huge structure suspended in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't a planet, or a ship, or anything that Dane could immediately recognize. It was an ancient construct, one that seemed to defy all known laws of physics. The sheer size of it was enough to make the crew gasp in unison. It stretched across a vast expanse, too vast to even comprehend. Its surface was jagged and twisted, like the bones of some colossal beast, scattered with symbols and glyphs that seemed to pulse with faint energy. The structure was dark, almost black in color, and appeared to absorb the light around it, as if it were a hole in the universe itself. "What is that?" Alara whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know," Dane muttered, unable to tear his eyes away. "But I think we've found what we were looking for." The Sovereign's wrath drifted closer to the structure, the massive shadow swallowing the ship's silhouette as it neared. As they approached, the ship's sensors flared with strange readings. Their scanners picked up energy signatures unlike anything they had encountered before, ancient yet still active. They also detected life signs, or rather, something that resembled life but wasn't quite. "Captain, there's something inside," Relic, the tactical officer, reported, his voice tight. "Life readings are erratic. I can't explain it, but they're moving, changing." "Can you isolate their location?" Dane asked, his grip tightening on the armrest of his chair. "I can try, but this structure is emitting so much interference that it's almost impossible to pinpoint anything." Relic paused, looking at Dane. "There's something else, too. I'm picking up faint signals like communication, but it's scrambled. Could be ancient technology or something trying to make contact." Dane's brow furrowed. The idea of an alien signal was nothing new. They had encountered strange signals before, but this was different. This wasn't just alien. It was older. Far older. "Shut everything down," he ordered. "I want absolute silence. We don't know what we're dealing with here." The ship fell into an eerie silence, the hum of the engines dying down as the crew watched in a mix of awe and apprehension. Alara adjusted her screens, trying to isolate the interference. "Captain, I think we should board." Dane turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Board? Are you suggesting we go inside that thing?" Alara's gaze never left the dark structure. "It's the only way to find out what's really happening here. We have no idea what's inside, but I'm starting to think that this is where the answers lie." He nodded slowly. The decision weighed heavily on him, but he knew she was right. They had come this far, they couldn't turn back now. "Prepare the boarding party," he said. "Get the equipment ready. And Alara." She turned to him. "Yes, Captain?" "Keep this ship in a holding pattern. If we don't come back within 12 hours, get out of here, you understand?" She nodded, her face a mix of determination and fear. "Understood." The ship's airlock opened, and a group of 5 crew members, including Dane and Alara, suited up for the journey. The silence was broken only by the hiss of oxygen being pumped into their suits as they boarded the shuttle. Relic was among the crew, his blaster firmly attached to his hip, though none of them knew whether they would need weapons in the place they were about to enter. The shuttle detached from the Sovereign's wrath with a soft lurch, and they slowly made their way toward the alien structure. The shuttle's thrusters barely made a sound as they glided forward, the massive structure growing ever larger in their viewport. It loomed over them like a tomb, silent and watchful. As they approached the structure's entrance, they were greeted with an overwhelming feeling of being watched. Dune felt his pulse race in his chest as the hatch to the shuttle slowly opened. The air outside was thick, dense with a charged energy that hummed just beneath their senses. The shadows inside the structure seemed to writhe, shifting like living things, but there was no light, just a foreboding, suffocating darkness. "Stay sharp," Dane ordered, his voice firm. "We don't know what's waiting for us in there." The crew filed out of the shuttle, weapons raised, their eyes scanning the endless corridor that stretched before them. The walls of the structure were smooth, slick with an oily substance that gleamed faintly in the darkness. Ancient symbols, covered the walls, their meanings lost to time. Dane's fingers brushed against one of them, and he felt a shiver run through his spine. It was like touching something that wasn't supposed to be touched, something forbidden. "This place feels wrong," Alara whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Dane didn't reply. He didn't have to. They all felt it. Something in the very air, something in the walls. It was as though they had crossed into another reality, one where time didn't flow in the way they understood, one that was older and more alien than anything they had ever encountered. And somewhere, deep within the labyrinth of this ancient construct, something stirred. Chapter 7. The Eye of the Storm. The crew of the Sovereign's Wrath moved cautiously through the winding halls of the ancient structure. The air around them felt thick, heavy with a strange energy that seemed to press down on them from every direction. Each footstep echoed eerily through the corridor, the sound amplified by the sheer emptiness of the place. The walls, slick with an oily substance, glimmered faintly in the dark, but offered no warmth, no comfort. It was as though the entire structure was alive with its own kind of consciousness, watching them from the shadows. "Captain, look at this." Alara's voice cut through the silence, her words tinged with awe and apprehension. She stood before a large set of intricately carved glyphs embedded into the wall. The symbols were so foreign, so ancient, that Dane could barely comprehend them. Yet, despite their incomprehensibility, there was something familiar about them, a strange resonance that vibrated in the very air. Dane stepped closer, inspecting the symbols. They were arranged in a circular pattern, forming an almost hypnotic spiral. The longer he stared at them, the more he felt as if they were pulling him, drawing him deeper into their mystery. His hand hovered over the wall, just inches from the glyphs, and for a moment, he felt a flicker of something, a sensation like a forgotten dream, something just beyond reach. He shook it off, his eyes narrowing. "We need to keep moving. This place is alive with energy. We don't know what's waiting for us." Relic, who had been silently observing the surroundings, nodded in agreement. "Agreed. But whatever is here, it isn't something that's been forgotten by time. It's waiting." They moved on, deeper into the heart of the structure. The air grew colder the further they ventured, and the walls seemed to close in around them. There was no clear path, no guideposts or markers. It was as if the entire structure had been built without any intention of guiding its visitors. Yet, they pressed on, compelled by the force that had drawn them here. Minutes passed, and then hours. The corridors twisted and turned, each one leading them into new chambers, each more disorienting than the last. Some were vast like underground cathedrals, their ceilings so high that they disappeared into darkness. Others were narrow, claustrophobic, their walls closing in like a trap. Despite the eerie silence, there was a sense of presence in the air, an intelligence that seemed to track their every movement. Alara stopped at the entrance to one such chamber, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Captain, you need to see this." Dane stepped forward and looked into the room, and his breath caught in his throat. The chamber was filled with monolithic pillars, their surfaces smooth and dark, each one adorned with the same alien glyphs they had seen earlier. But what struck him the most was the center of the room. At its heart, there was a massive, glowing orb, suspended in midair by no visible means. The orb pulsed with an eerie light, casting long, twisting shadows across the room. It was beautiful, in a way, otherworldly, hypnotic, but something about it sent a chill down his spine. It was too perfect, too still, as though it were waiting for something to happen. "What is this?" Alara murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Dane felt a surge of unease. The orb seemed to call to them, its pulsating glow like the beating heart of the structure itself. But the longer he stared at it, the more he realized that it wasn't just an object. It was something far more profound, a relic of an ancient civilization that had long since vanished from history. "It's a beacon," Dane said, his voice firm, as if trying to convince himself. "A signal of some kind. Whatever is left of the first ones, this is their message. Rennick, ever the pragmatist, raised an eyebrow. A message from who? And why leave something like this just hanging here? Maybe it's a warning, Dane said. Or maybe it's a trap, but we're here now, there's no turning back. The crew stood in uneasy silence, each of them contemplating the implications of the discovery. No one wanted to speak the words out loud, but they all knew what had to be done. The orb was a key, a way to understand the past, the present, and perhaps even the future. It was impossible to ignore, even if it felt like a step into the void. We need to approach carefully, Dane said finally. Alara, do you have any idea what this could be? Alara shook her head slowly. The energy readings are off the charts. This orb is emitting radiation unlike anything I've ever seen. It's not just energy, it's consciousness, like it's trying to communicate. Dane frowned. Trying to communicate? How? I don't know, Alara admitted, her brow furrowing. But I think it's alive, in some way, like a kind of mind or intelligence. The room seemed to hum in agreement, and Dane's pulse quickened. It was as if the structure was responding to their presence, acknowledging them in some subtle, almost imperceptible way. The air felt charged now, the very particles around them vibrating with an unseen force. Without another word, Dane stepped forward, approaching the orb with deliberate caution. He had no idea what might happen when he got close, whether the orb would trigger something catastrophic, or whether it would open a door to knowledge far beyond their comprehension. But he knew one thing. They had come too far to turn back now. As his fingers hovered just inches from the orb, a low hum filled the air, a deep resonance that seemed to come from the very core of the structure itself. The orb's glow intensified, becoming brighter and more erratic. Dane recoiled instinctively. But before he could step back, the light flared, blinding, overwhelming, and then nothing. The room went dark. The crew froze, hearts pounding, unsure of what had just happened. The sudden loss of light left them, disoriented, and the eerie silence that followed was more suffocating than any sound could have been. For a moment, it felt as though time itself had stopped. Then, a voice, soft, low, and echoing from all directions, broke the silence. You have come, but you are not ready. The words sent a shock through Dane's body, his breath catching in his throat. It was the same voice they had heard before, the voice of the first one. But now it was clearer, more urgent, as if it were trying to make contact in a way that transcended language. Who are you? Dine demanded, his voice firm but tinged with fear. The voice responded, and it seemed to come from everywhere, filling the chamber with a deep, reverberating presence. We are the first ones. We are the builders, the creators. You seek to understand, but there are things you cannot comprehend. You are not ready for the truth. Not yet. Dane's fists clenched, his teeth gritting in frustration. What truth? What is this place? What happened to you? The voice was silent for a moment, as though considering the question. Then it answered, You are in the eye of the storm, a place where time and space collapse, a place where all things end and begin. But this is not your time. You cannot stay here. You cannot understand what lies beyond. Dane's mind raced. The eye of the storm. Was this where it all began? Was this where the first ones had come from? What do you want from us? He asked, his voice growing more desperate. The answer was simple yet profound. You will find what you seek. But be warned. Some truths are not meant to be known. Some questions are better left unanswered. Choose wisely, for your future lies in the balance. Before Dane could respond, the orb flared once again, and the voice faded into silence. The darkness that had enveloped the room began to recede, replaced by a soft, ambient light. The orb's glow dimmed, its pulse slowing. What the hell was that? Rennick asked, his voice shaky. What did we just hear? Dane stood motionless, his mind whirling. The first ones, the truth, the eye of the storm, all of it pointed to something far bigger than anything they had ever imagined. The past, the future, the fabric of existence. It was all tangled together and they were standing at the center of it. "We need to go," Dain said finally, his voice steady. "Now." Alara looked at him, concern in her eyes. "Captain." "What?" "About the orb." Dain's gaze lingered on it for a moment longer before he turned away. "We've seen enough." The crew turned and began to make their way back through the structure, their steps heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. The truth, whatever it was, remained just out of reach. But one thing was clear. The path they had chosen was leading them to something far greater than they could possibly understand. And the consequences of their discovery could reshape the fate of the universe. As they reached the shuttle, Dain glanced back at the ominous structure one last time. The eye of the storm was watching them, waiting. And for the first time, he felt the heavy burden of what it meant to be truly ready. Joderate, the echoes of the past. The shuttle shuddered as it re-entered the Sovereign's wrath, the magnetic locks securing its connection to the hull with a hiss. Dain Valcor could feel the weight of the journey pressing down on him as he stood. At the shuttle's hatch, his hand resting on the cold metal. The encounter with the eye of the storm had left him unsettled, the words of the first ones echoing in his mind. "You are not ready." What had they meant? What truth had they been guarding? The crew filed in behind him, their faces pale, their eyes wide with the shock of what they had just experienced. They were all haunted by the same question. What had they discovered in that place? And more importantly, what consequences would it bring? As the airlock sealed behind them, Dain took a moment to collect himself. The ship's interior, though familiar, now felt like a distant world. The hum of the engines, the soft whir of machinery, it all seemed so distant, so small compared to the vastness of what they had just encountered. But he couldn't afford to linger on his own feelings. The crew needed him now more than ever. He turned to face them, the weight of leadership settling back onto his shoulders. "Report," he ordered, his voice firm though his heart raced. Alara Voss, who had been unnervingly quiet since their return, spoke first. Her voice was strained, as though every word required an immense amount of effort. "Captain, the orb, it wasn't just energy. There's something inside it, something that's still active. I can't explain it, but I believe it was trying to communicate with us. It felt like it was probing our minds, our thoughts." Dain nodded, taking in her words. It was what he had suspected. The orb was no mere artifact. It was something far more powerful. Something that had been waiting for centuries, or even millennia, for someone to activate it. And now that they had, he feared they had unleashed something far beyond their control. "Do you think it's dangerous?" he asked. Alara hesitated. "I don't know, but I felt it, Captain. It wasn't just an object. It was alive. It was aware. And it was looking for something. Something in us. It wanted us to make a choice to decide whether or not we were worthy of the knowledge it held." Relic, the tactical officer who had been silent up until now, scoffed. "That's a hell of a claim, Alara. We're talking about an ancient relic, not a sentient being." "Are you sure?" Alara shot back, her eyes narrowing. "Because I've never felt anything like that before. It was like it knew us, knew our deepest fears and desires, and it was offering us a choice. But not just any choice. A choice that could change the course of history." Dain's gaze drifted to the viewport, where the stars glimmered coldly in the distance. His thoughts swirled, but there was one thing he knew for certain. Whatever the first ones had intended, they hadn't just created a relic. They had created something that could shape the future of the universe. He turned back to the crew. "We can't ignore this. We need to understand what it wanted. But we can't do this alone. Prepare to send a message to the Coalition. They need to know what we've found." Alara stepped forward, concern on her face. "You think the Coalition will believe us? After everything we've been through?" "We have no choice," Dain replied. "If we don't get ahead of this, it'll be too late. Whatever the first ones left behind is powerful, and we need all the allies we can get." 2 hours later, Dain stood in front of the command console, staring at the blinking lights of the communication system. The message was being sent, a distress signal, to the Coalition, but he wasn't sure what kind of response they would get. The Coalition had its own interests, its own agenda, and Dane wasn't certain whether they would view the discovery as an opportunity or a threat. As he watched the transmission process, he felt a sudden jolt, an awareness that hadn't been there before. His heart skipped a beat, and he turned to look at Alara, who was standing nearby, her expression mirroring his confusion. It was like a presence had entered the room, a consciousness that wasn't theirs. For a split second, the air itself seemed to hum, vibrating with a strange energy. "Captain," Alara said, her voice trembling. "Did you feel that?" Dane nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving the console. "Something's happening. Something's responding." Before either of them could react, the lights flickered, and the communication panel began to glow with a soft, eerie light. The screen blinked to life, and a figure appeared, one they all knew too well. It was an image, a hologram, but the person standing before them was unmistakable. It was Counselor Lyria, the Coalition representative they had met years ago during their initial mission. She appeared calm, but there was something unsettling about her. The way her image flickered, the way her eyes seemed to pierce through the screen. It was almost as if she were there in the room with them. "Captain Valcor," her voice crackled. Through the speakers, smooth but laced with an undercurrent of something darker. "I see you've made contact. You should have known better than to mess with things you don't understand." Dane stiffened, but he held his ground. "Counselor, we've found something. The first one's left behind a message. An artifact, a relic. It's active, and it's alive. We need to know more, and we need your help." Lyria's hologram tilted, her head slightly as if considering his words. "And why would we help you, Captain? What makes you think the Coalition is interested in your little discovery?" "It's not just a discovery, Lyria," Dane replied, his tone sharp. "This is bigger than anything we've encountered. The relic is more than just a piece of ancient technology. It's a weapon. It has the power to reshape the galaxy, to control minds, to influence entire populations. If we don't figure out what it's capable of, we risk losing everything." Lyria's eyes narrowed, her expression unreadable. "You've seen the relic, and now you think you can control it? You think you can control what the first one's left behind? Do you know the power you're dealing with, Captain? The truth you seek will destroy you if you're not careful." Dane felt a chill run down his spine. The words were cold, final. It was clear that Lyria knew more than she was letting on, but why was she being so cryptic? Was she afraid of the relic, or was there something deeper at play here? "I'm not asking for control," Dane said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm asking for your help. If we don't figure this out together, we'll be facing something we can't stop. The Coalition is the only organization with the resources to help us. We need to act quickly." Lyria's hologram flickered again, this time more violently, as if something was interfering with the transmission. For a moment, Dane thought the message was about to cut off, but then Lyria's image stabilized once more. "I will send a team to your location," she said, her voice barely a whisper now. "But be warned, Captain, you are not ready for what comes next. The first ones didn't just leave behind relics, they left behind a warning. You're touching something you shouldn't, and once you do, there's no going back." The transmission ended abruptly, and the screen went dark. The following day, the crew gathered in the briefing room, the mood heavy with uncertainty. Dane paced in front of the table, his mind racing with questions. Lyria's words had been ominous, dangerous even. It was clear that the Coalition wasn't just interested in the relic for scientific reasons. There was something more at stake here, something they weren't telling him. Alara sat at the table, her fingers nervously tapping against the surface. "What now, Captain? Are we supposed to just wait for them? You saw the way she reacted. It's like she knew what we were dealing with." Dane stopped pacing and turned to face her. "I know, and I don't like it. But we don't have much choice. We need their help, and we need it fast." Rennick crossed his arms. So we're just going to trust the coalition? After everything that's happened? We don't have another option, Dane replied. But we'll be careful. We can't trust them. Completely not after what Lyria said. We'll keep our eyes open. Suddenly the ship's alarms blared, a shrill warning cutting through the air. The crew scrambled to their positions, their eyes wide with panic. "Report!" Dane shouted as he rushed to the command console. "Incoming vessel!" Rennick barked. "Unknown! Configuration. It's not coalition." Dane's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't the help they were expecting. Chapter 9. The Shadows Approach. The alarms blared louder now, their shrill tones slicing through the air of the Sovereign's wrath, turning the once calm and composed command deck into a scene of urgency and chaos. Dwayne Valcor's heart pounded in his chest as he raced toward the central console, his mind racing through the possibilities. The unknown vessel's signature didn't match any known readings in the Coalition's databases, and it certainly wasn't anything they had encountered before. "Status!" Dane barked, his voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline flooding his system. Rennick, always the tactical officer, was already hunched over his console, fingers flying across the screen. "I don't like this, Captain. The ship's on an intercept course. If it keeps up at this rate, it'll be within weapons range in under 5 minutes. It's not responding to hails." "What's the ship's composition?" Dane asked, narrowing his gaze. "Unknown," Rennick replied, his voice tight with suspicion. "It's not broadcasting any data, but there's a strange energy signature around it, almost like the Relic. It's like it's cloaked in a field, preventing our sensors from fully scanning it." Dane's stomach dropped. Could it be related? "Do the first ones?" he asked, though the words tasted bitter on his tongue. He had hoped that the Relic was their only threat, but now it seemed as if the universe had a far darker plan in mind. Before Rennick could respond, Alara's voice rang, out from behind them. "Captain, you need to see this." Dane turned, his pulse quickening. Alara's hands hovered over her console, her face pale, her eyes wide. There was a look of dread etched on her features, something that struck Dane harder than the alarms. "What is it, Alara?" he asked, though the feeling of impending doom gnawed at him. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she gestured for Dane to step forward, and when he did, he saw it. The holographic projection of the unknown vessel. It was massive, dwarfing the Sovereign's wrath. Its surface was a strange, shifting black material that seemed to absorb the light around it, giving it an almost liquid-like quality. Dane had never seen anything like it. It was like the ship was crafted from the void itself, as though it were part of the darkness between the stars. And then, something even more unsettling appeared. On the projection, the ship's hull began to shimmer, and faint symbols, glyphs, emerged across its surface. They were eerily similar to the ones they had encountered on the Relic, the same alien script, but twisted, corrupted. Doreen felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He wasn't sure what he was seeing, but it was clear this vessel was more than just a ship. It was a message, a warning. "It's like they're calling us," Alara said, her voice strained, "like they know we're here." Dane straightened, his eyes narrowing. The hairs on his neck prickled with the feeling of being watched. He had felt it before, the presence, the awareness, that same sensation of being in the midst of something, far beyond their comprehension. But now it was different. This wasn't a relic or a signal from an ancient race. This was something else, something alive. "Captain, we have to make a decision," Rennick said, his voice cutting through the tension. "The ship's not responding to hails. It's heading directly for us, and we're not armed enough to repel it. If they wanted us dead, we'd already be dead." Dane swallowed hard. He knew they couldn't outrun the unknown vessel. But engaging it, especially with the ominous symbols flashing across its hull, seemed like a death sentence in itself. Yet there was no time to second guess. The unknown was here, and it was closing in on them. They had to act, set all systems to full readiness. "I want shields up, engines at full power. Prepare to engage at the first sign of hostile action," Dane ordered, his voice commanding. The crew scrambled into action, their movements quick and efficient as they worked to prepare the Sovereign's wrath for what lay ahead. Dane's mind raced, but his focus remained sharp. The image of the unknown vessel, the way its surface seemed to shift and pulse with life, haunted him. What kind of power were they dealing with? Was this ship another creation of the first ones? Or was it something far older, far darker, Captain? Alera's voice was strained. I'm not sure what's happening, but there's a sudden fluctuation in the energy readings. The ship's field, it's shifting. It's like it's trying to interface with us. What do you mean? Dane asked sharply, turning to her. It's trying to communicate, Alera explained, her voice barely above a whisper. There's a pattern, like a pulse. I think it's attempting to sync with our systems. Dane froze, the words hitting him like a punch to the gut. No, don't let it. But it was too late. Before anyone could react, the display flickered, and the strange, dark ship's symbols began to flash in rhythm with the pulse coming from the hull. Dane's heart began to race as he felt a sudden pressure building within. The walls of the ship, a force that seemed to come from the very core of the unknown vessel. It was like the structure of the Sovereign's wrath itself was being shaken from the inside. Alera's fingers danced across her console. The ship's systems, they're reacting to the pulses. I can't stop it. It's overriding everything. The entire bridge was suddenly plunged into darkness. The lights went out. The hum of the engines vanished. And for a moment, Dane felt a vacuum, an emptiness that pressed in on them from all sides. The ship groaned as if it were about to fall apart, and a chilling silence followed. Dane's heart pounded in his ears, the seconds stretching into what felt like eternity. Then, a single voice echoed through the void. It wasn't a sound they could hear, but something they could feel. It was deep, like a vibration in the bones, a whisper in the mind. You are not alone. The word sent a shock through Dane's chest. He wasn't sure if it was the ship, the unknown entity, or the relic from the eye of the storm itself, but he felt it deep within his soul. The weight of those words, of that presence, was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Captain, Alera's voice broke through the silence, her panic palpable. The systems. Then, a flash of light, bright, blinding, illuminated the bridge. And in the blink of an eye, the crew found themselves no longer in the Sovereign's wrath. The void, the sudden shift was disorienting. One moment, Dane had been standing on the bridge, staring at the strange ship, trying to keep his composure. And the next, he was here, in the void. There was no up, no down, no direction, no sound, just darkness, stretching into infinity. He could feel the presence again, that strange awareness. It was everywhere, suffocating, inescapable. Dane's breath caught in his throat as he looked around, trying to make sense of the chaos around him. He saw his crew standing next to him, their faces filled with confusion and fear. What the hell just happened? Relic demanded, his voice shaky. Alera's hands moved frantically over her console, but nothing responded. She turned to Dane, her eyes wide. Captain, we've been pulled into another dimension. This isn't real. It can't be real. Dane's gaze shifted to the void around them. It wasn't just the ship's systems that had gone dark. It was the entirety of reality. It felt like they were trapped in the space between worlds. We've been pulled into the ship's domain, Dane said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. It's showing us something we're not ready for. A deep rumble, like the sound of the universe itself groaning, filled the air. The void seemed to twist, and suddenly something began to take shape. A figure. It was towering, impossible to comprehend, shifting like liquid shadows and firelight. It was both there and not there, something between the dimensions, and yet it was real. The figure spoke, not in words, but in a voice that resonated deep within Dane's mind. You have trespassed, and now you will witness what lies beyond. The crew stood frozen, their minds overwhelmed by the sheer presence of the entity before them. It wasn't speaking to them in a language they understood. It was speaking through their thoughts, invading their very consciousness. Captain, what is it? Alera whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know, Dain said, his voice hollow. But I think we've just crossed into the heart of the unknown. Chapter 10. The truth beyond the veil. The entity loomed before them, a shadow, an abstraction made flesh. Or was it flesh at all? Dain Valkor's mind struggled to comprehend what he was seeing. It wasn't a humanoid figure, nor was it entirely alien. It was a presence, a convergence of shapes, sounds, and sensations that made his brain ache with the effort to understand. It seemed both ancient and timeless, both the beginning and the end of all things. The crew of the Sovereign's Wrath stood frozen, paralyzed by a fear they could not name. Even Relic, the seasoned tactical officer who had faced death countless times in battle, looked small, fragile under the weight of this encounter. His hand hovered near his weapon, but Dain knew that even their most powerful weapons would be useless here. This was not a battle to be fought with guns. No, this was something far more complex. Who are you? Dain's voice was barely a whisper, trembling with uncertainty. He had spoken out of instinct, but he knew the question would not yield the answer they sought. It was a question too small, too human, to encompass the magnitude of the entity's being. The figure before them rippled, like a reflection in disturbed water, and then it spoke. The voice was not a voice at all, but a thought, transmitted directly into their minds, bypassing language altogether. You stand at the threshold. A threshold you were never meant to cross. The words resonated with a power that reverberated deep in Dain's chest. His heart felt like it was beating in sync with the pulse of the being. He could feel it, a presence so vast, so ancient, it threatened to overwhelm his consciousness. The very air felt thick with its essence, and it pressed in on him from all sides. You're not real. Hilara's voice cut through the suffocating silence, but there was no conviction in it. It was more of a statement to convince herself than anything else. This can't be real. Real, the entity murmured, its voice like a sigh that reverberated in their minds, stretching across the infinite expanse of the void. What is real, if not that which is perceived? What is real, if not that which exists within the boundaries of your limited understanding? Hilara's breath hitched, and Dain could feel her fear, her confusion, her desperate need for control. The entity had touched her mind, as it had touched his. It was not an attack, not a hostile force, at least not in the way they understood it. But it was an invasion, a break from the familiar reality they knew. Who are you? Dain repeated, louder this time. His voice was firmer, though he could feel the tremor in his throat. What do you want from us? The entity shifted, its form rippling like water disturbed by a pebble. I do not want from you, it said, its tone almost amused. I am not bound by your concepts of want. I am the echo of a forgotten age, the remnant of those who walked before. I am the veil between what is known and what is lost. The crew exchanged uncertain glances. Dain's mind raced, trying to process the cryptic message. The words of the entity were unlike anything he had ever heard before. There was a chilling, otherworldly logic to them, one that didn't follow the usual patterns of reasoning. They spoke of ancient histories, of things lost to time, things that were now beyond the grasp of any living being. Hilara stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the entity. The first ones, she muttered, as if she had finally pieced together the puzzle in her mind. You're the remnants of the first ones, aren't you? The ones who left the relics behind, the ones who were trying to control the galaxy before they disappeared. The first ones. The entity seemed to laugh, a sound that was both distant and terrifying. They were the architects of reality, yes, but they were also their own undoing. The relics they left behind, they were not meant to be used by those who came after. They were never meant for you. Dain felt his heart pound in his chest. What do you mean? What were they trying to do? What is the relic? The entity's form shuddered, expanding and contracting as it spoke. The first ones sought to shape the universe, to forge it in their image, but they were consumed by their own ambition. They believed they could control all that they saw, bend the cosmos to their will. They failed. They became gods in their own eyes, and as gods often do, they believed that their existence was eternal. But even gods can die. And when they did, they left behind their echoes, their remnants. The relics are a part of this. They are pieces of their failed design. The room was heavy with silence. Dine's mind struggled to grasp the enormity of the revelation. The first ones, the beings who had created both factions that now fought across the stars, had once controlled the universe, reshaped it, but in the end, they had fallen. They had failed, and now their creations, the relics, remained silent, witnesses to their downfall. "Why are you showing us this?" Dane asked, though he was already beginning to suspect the answer. "Because you are standing on the precipice," the entity replied, its voice carrying a weight that made Dane's chest tighten. "You, the ones who awakened the relic, you are the inheritors of the First One's legacy, whether you will it or not. The relic you found is a key, not just to the past, but to the future. You are being given a choice to either continue the First One's design or to reject it, to forge your own path. But be warned, Captain Valcor, the path you choose will not be easy. The universe does not forget the sins of its creators." Dane shook his head. "I don't understand. What choice? Are you talking about?" The entity's form flickered, its shape distorting as if to gather itself before it spoke again. "The choice is simple, yet it carries consequences that will ripple through eternity. You can take the relic, understand its power, and use it to reshape reality as the first ones once did. Or you can destroy it and walk away, leaving the universe to continue its inevitable march toward chaos. But know this, either choice will change everything. There is no going back." Alara, who had been standing at Dane's side, suddenly spoke. "But what if we're not ready for that kind of responsibility? What if we can't control it? What if we make the same mistake the first ones made?" The entity seemed to pause, its form shifting like a wave of energy. "It is true that you are not ready, Alara Voss. None of you are. But readiness is not the question. The question is whether you deserve to wield such power. The first ones were consumed by their desire to control, but they did not have the strength to look beyond themselves. They failed, not because they were not capable, but because they could not see beyond their own ambition. You are faced with a similar choice, but your fate is not sealed. The future is not written." Relic, who had remained silent up until now, finally spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "So, you're telling us that if we take the relic, if we use it, we could reshape the universe, create a new order?" "Yes," the entity replied. "But beware. The cost of such power is not easily paid. The universe will resist change, and those who try to reshape it will face consequences far beyond their understanding. The balance of existence is delicate, and the choices you make will reverberate across all of creation." Dain's mind raced, the enormity of the decision sinking in. They had stumbled upon something ancient, something far beyond their comprehension, a relic of unimaginable power, one that could reshape the universe itself. But the question gnawed at him. Was it a gift or a curse? The crew stood in silence, each of them grappling with their own fears, their own doubts. They were at a crossroads, a moment in time where everything they knew could either be reaffirmed or undone, and Dine knew, deep in his bones, that the future of the universe rested in their hands. Chapter 11. The final decision. The weight of the entity's words hung in the air like a suffocating fog. Dine Valcor's mind was spinning, trying to piece together the fractured revelations he had just been handed. The universe, the relic, the fate of every living being across the stars. Everything hinged on the next decision they made. The crew stood together in the void, surrounded by an entity beyond their understanding, trapped in a space that defied the natural laws of physics and reality. It was as if time itself had folded in upon them, leaving them suspended in a place between places, a moment that would define the fate of the cosmos. Dane's gaze flicked between the crew members, each one processing the information in their own way. Relic was pacing, muttering to himself, his brow furrowed in thought. Alara was staring at the shifting form of the entity, her expression unreadable. Kellen, the engineer, stood apart, his eyes clouded with doubt, clearly torn between his loyalty to the crew and the impossible power they had uncovered. And then there was Dane himself. The weight of leadership, of the responsibility for these lives, was heavier than he had ever felt. The crew had followed him to the edge of this unknown universe, and now they were being asked to make a choice that would ripple across time and space. It was a decision that could destroy everything they knew, or grant them a power unimaginable. The entity spoke again, its voice resonating in their minds, a cold, calculated reminder of their predicament. You are at a crossroads. What you choose now will echo through the stars, beyond the reach of even the most powerful of empires. The Relic has chosen you. But will you choose wisely? Will you dare to wield what the first ones could not control? The silence stretched, long and oppressive. Dane stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with the gravity of the moment. You keep saying the future isn't written, but everything we've seen, everything you've shown us feels like a sentence. The first ones failed. How can we be any different? We're just like them. Just people. The entity's form rippled, almost as if in amusement before it responded. The first ones were not just people, Captain Valcor. They were gods for a time. And yet even they could not see beyond their own desires. They believed they could control everything, every star, every life, every moment. But control is an illusion, and ambition is a dangerous thing. Do you understand that now? Or will you too become what you hate? Dane clenched his fists, the weight of the question pressing on him. He had been raised to lead, to make decisions, for the good of his people. But this was different. This was not a matter of right and wrong or of good and evil. This was a choice between the unknown and the unimaginable. We aren't gods, Dane muttered, more to himself than anyone else. We never were. Alara moved to his side, her face etched with the same uncertainty Dane had seen in her eyes earlier. But maybe we don't need to be. Maybe the power isn't about control, maybe it's about something else, something we can't even understand yet. Or maybe it's all a trap. Rennick's voice was bitter, the skepticism of a man who had seen far too many battles fought with weapons and deceit. Maybe the entity is just playing us, trying to push us into using the relic for some unknown purpose. The first ones were too ambitious, but what if the real danger lies in doing exactly what they tried to do? Dane looked over at him. And what do we do then? Walk away, leave the relic, let the universe continue its path towards destruction? Rennick didn't answer immediately. His jaw clenched, and for a moment it seemed as if he might challenge Dane. But then his shoulders sagged, and he looked down at the floor, as if the weight of the decision was crushing him from within. Walk away? Alara echoed, her voice trembling with emotion. Maybe. But could we live with that? Could we live with knowing we had the chance to stop it all? To change the course of history, and we did nothing? The entity spoke again, its voice smooth, almost coaxing, but with an edge of inevitability. The relic is a gift and a curse. It can reshape the universe, give it new life, or plunge it into eternal darkness. It depends on what you choose to do with it. But choose wisely, Captain Valcor. If you do not, you may find that the universe will make its own choice for you. There are consequences to every action, and time has already begun to bend. Your decision will be the catalyst. Alara's words hung in the air like an accusation, a call to action that none of them could ignore. We can't turn back, she said. We've already crossed the threshold. Now we either face the consequences of our inaction, or we face the consequences of our decision. Dane took a deep breath, his mind racing. He felt the weight of their stares on him, felt the weight of his entire crew depending on him. This wasn't just about them anymore. This was about the future of the galaxy itself. He glanced at each of them, Rennick, Alara, Kellen, and then back at the entity. How do we know the relic won't destroy us all? Dane asked, his voice thick with resolve. You say we can either reshape the universe or let it fall into chaos. But what if the relic chooses to destroy everything in the process? What if the first ones were right to fear it? The entity's form shifted again, expanding, its presence pressing in around them. That is the danger you must face. The relic is not a tool for mere mortals. It is a force of creation and destruction, a key to unlocking potential beyond comprehension. The first ones failed because they believed they could control it. They thought they could wield it like a weapon, but in doing so they destroyed themselves. If you embrace it, you must be prepared to face what lies beyond your understanding. What will you create, Captain Valcor? What will you become? There it was, the choice, hanging before them, like a precipice, a decision that could lead to either redemption or ruin. I can't make this decision alone, Dane said finally, his voice quiet but firm. He turned to his crew, looking them each in the eye. I need all of you. We need to make this decision. Together. Rennick stepped forward first, his eyes narrowing as he considered the words of the entity. We've seen what happens when power is abused. We've seen entire civilizations fall to ambition. But what if we could create something better, something more than just survival? What if the relic can be used for good? Alara nodded, her face full of determination. I agree. We can't just destroy it, not without knowing what it could do. We have to understand it, control it, and make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Kellen spoke last, his voice softer but filled with a quiet wisdom. Whatever we choose, we do it together. We either face the consequences of our actions or the consequences of doing nothing at all. Dane turned back to the entity. His decision had been made. It wasn't about control, it wasn't about power. It was about the future they would create, not just for themselves, but for the galaxy itself. We accept the relic's power, Dane said, his voice ringing with authority. But we will not be slaves to it. We will use it, but we will never forget that it is not ours to control. We will shape the future, but we will never forget our humanity. The entity's form seemed to pulse, its shape flickering as if in approval. So it shall be, it said, its voice tinged with something like satisfaction. The future is yours to forge. But remember, nothing comes without sacrifice. The void around them seemed to ripple, the darkness receding as light slowly began to return. The Sovereign's wrath appeared before them once more, its hull gleaming under the light of distant stars. The crew stood at the edge of a new era, their fates and the fate of the universe intertwined in a single, unalterable choice. Dane took one last look at the crew, then turned his gaze to the stars. The relic, its power still unknown, now lay in their hands. The question remained, what would they do with it? Epilogue. The legacy of the choice. The stars had not changed. Not really. They still glimmered cold and distant, hung in the velvet expanse like silent witnesses to the great unfolding of history. But for those aboard the Sovereign's wrath, the galaxy had become something different. It wasn't just a collection of planets and empires anymore. It wasn't just the distant hum of conflict that filled the void between worlds. Now it was a canvas. Dane Valcor stood on the bridge of the Sovereign's wrath, his eyes fixed on the swirling nebula in the distance. It was a beautiful sight, ethereal, vast, a reminder of the immensity of space. But more than that, it was a reminder of their decision, the decision they had made, together, to shape the future, to embrace the power of the relic, and to walk. A path that had no clear ending. Alara stood beside him, her gaze focused on the stars, too. The weight of the burden was still there, but it was different now. It was no longer a crushing weight of responsibility. Instead, it had become a mantle they wore with pride. The universe was theirs to influence, but they would never forget. The lesson they had learned, the lesson of the first ones. Power was not a gift, it was a challenge. We've come a long way, Alara said quietly, breaking the silence that had settled over the bridge. Her voice was calm, but beneath it there was a trace of wonder, of awe at the journey they had just undertaken. Dane turned toward her. We have. And we're only just beginning. The entity's words still echoed in his mind. There is no going back. For better or for worse, they had crossed a threshold that few could even fathom. The relic, its power and its promise were now in their hands. It had granted them a chance to rewrite the rules of the universe itself. But it had also shown them the dangers of such ambition. The question that lingered, what would they create, still loomed large, but now it felt less like a burden and more like an opportunity. The crew had adapted in their own ways. Relic had become the staunch protector of their integrity, refusing to let the power of the relic blind them to the consequences of their actions. He had embraced the lessons of the past, and now, more than ever, he was their moral compass, ensuring they did not repeat the mistakes of those who had come before. Kellen had thrown himself into the study of the relic, analyzing every component, every fragment of its ancient design. His technical expertise had revealed secrets beyond the reach of ordinary science. But he was more than just a technician now. He had become the keeper of knowledge, the anchor that grounded them in a reality that might otherwise have slipped through their fingers. And then there was the ship itself, the Sovereign's Wrath. It was more than a vessel now. With the relic's influence, it had taken on an almost sentient quality, its systems humming with a life that was not entirely mechanical. The crew's connection to the ship had deepened, and Dane could sense it in the subtle shifts of the air and the way the ship responded to their presence, almost as if it, too, was becoming part of their journey. Alera's voice interrupted his thoughts again. We've created something, haven't we? We've reshaped the future, but it's not just the relic, it's what we've chosen to do with it. Dane nodded, turning away from the view of the stars and toward her. It's what we've chosen to become. And there, in that moment, as the crew gathered around the bridge, Dane realized that the true power of the relic wasn't in its raw energy or its potential to reshape reality. The true power lay in the choices they made every day. It lay in the decisions to act with wisdom, to avoid the mistakes of those who had come before them. The first ones had wanted to control the universe, to mold it into their image. But control had been their downfall. Now it was their turn to create, but not through domination, through choice, through collaboration, through humility. We've made the right choice, Alera said softly, but we'll need to remain vigilant. The power we wield is dangerous. The galaxy may still fear what we've become. Let them, Dane said, his voice steady and unwavering. Let them fear the unknown. It is the only way we'll protect it. In the distance, a new star was born, a brilliant flash of light that momentarily outshone the rest of the galaxy. The crew watched as it illuminated the darkness, an emblem of hope, a symbol of new beginnings. They didn't have all the answers. The future was still unknown, the relic's full potential still unexplored. But they had something more valuable than answers. They had choice. And with it, they could shape the destiny of the universe, not through force or domination, but through understanding, unity, and the knowledge that every action rippled out into the cosmos. Maybe the future was never written, Dane murmured, his voice carrying a sense of finality, but it's ours to write now. As the stars glittered beyond the ship's hull, the Sovereign's Wrath sailed into the unknown, guided by the light of their decision. A decision that would forever echo across time. They had chosen the future, and the galaxy, for the first time in millennia, was theirs to shape. The end. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Let me know in the comments what ideas you would like the next story to be about. Please leave a thumbs up, share, subscribe, comment.